By now you've seen the video on using the mat, and I appreciate you watching that. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the care and cleaning of it between uses. So I think one of the most important things as far as the use of it is getting the seasoning right the first time. So I'm going to walk you through side by side a brand new mat and then one that's been used to show you the difference in the pliability of it, and then how to roll it up and clean it in between uses. So let me start over here with a brand new mat. So you're going to pop it out of the tube, first time use. And the tissue paper that comes in between the two sheets that are included can be thrown away. That's really just to keep it nice between use while we're packaging it to get to you. And then after it gets to you, you can just discard it. You don't need it anymore. So you can see right off the bat, coming out of the package, that this is a little bit stiffer than a mat that's been seasoned. This is nice and pliable, and this is a little bit stickier. So here's where you need to take care to season it correctly. So you'll just peel the top sheet back and kind of open it up like a book, and then take just a little bit of shortening. Some countries call it just white fat, and with it's vegetable shortening, so you don't have to worry about it getting on your hands. A little bit on your hands, and just barely touch with your fingertips, kind of all over it. Dot, 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 kind of wipe, wipe, wipe. And you can either fold this second sheet that I pulled off down on top of it to pick that up, or you can also go back and do the same thing with this second sheet. Just a very, very light coat. I'd say if anybody makes a mistake with this, it's using too much shortening. The purpose here is not to have the fondant not stick to the mat. You'll know from the use video of the mat that we actually do want it sticking to the mat. The purpose is so that the mat sheets don't stick to each other. Okay, so once you've got that shortening on there, you'll take a nice lint-free clean paper towel and wipe off the excess. So really, again, not a heavy coat, just light, light coat. Because you can actually work against yourself if you've got too much shortening on there. All right, so wiping off the excess. All right, now you're going to fold this top sheet back down. And you can tell, even though I've put the shortening on there, it hasn't had its use yet. It hasn't been broken in yet. So it's still a little bit stiffer than the set of mats that are broken in. And we'll show you the difference when you're rolling it out here in just a second. Right now I want to talk to you about how to clean the mat in between uses. So let's say you've used the mat maybe for a wedding cake, you've done 2 or 3 layers or whatever. You shouldn't have too much residue left on here from the fondant itself. The fondant works really great with the mat properties. It pulls excess shortening off. It leaves behind what it should. So typically what you need to do is just wipe with a damp paper towel in between uses, and that's it. If you have something that's gotten on here, some residue, some buttercream, some fondant, some kind of like sticky color, something like that, you can absolutely wash these in warm soapy water if that's the case. Ideally, you just want to wipe them between uses, but if you have to get some residue off, you can wash them in the sink with warm soapy water with a good rinse. You would hang them up to dry, drip dry. Then if you have color left on it, something like that, there's a couple of options that you can do. I know some countries don't allow alcohol, but the Everclear, the pure grain alcohol is a really good option if you just want to pull out color. If that's not allowed in your country, you can use a bleach. Just make sure you rinse really well afterwards to get that residue off. After you've washed it with warm soapy water, if it's still a fairly new mat, you might need to season it lightly one more time, but after time, you won't need to keep doing that. A couple of other notes that I want to make about cleaning the mat. If you don't get all of that color out, maybe the vinyl's been stained just a little bit, let me show you down here that here the pink is on the stained in the mat a little bit, and I have cleaned it really, really well. I'll roll it one more time so you know that I'm telling the truth here. This stain in the mat is actually not going to transfer onto your white fondant. See how nice and clean that is? So as long as you've cleaned it really well and used like an alcohol or a chlorine bleach to get that out, it's going to be fine to use it. It still has color in it. One last note about cleaning. Please make sure it's really, really dry. I've had a lot of people wash it in between uses because they really want to take good care, and that's great. But if there's any amount of dampness left on there, it's going to grab that fondant. So really the best thing to do between uses is just wipe it clean with a damp, slightly damp paper towel or even a dry paper towel and leave it at that. Only wash it if you really have to get that residue off. Now what we're going to do is talk about rolling out the fondant on the mat a little bit to show you what to expect when you get it. I know that a lot of you are really excited about getting the mat for the first time. Some even pay like really high overnight shipping fees to get it there in time. So if you just take a couple of seconds and watch through the rest of this, you're gonna have a lot of success with it. First thing is make sure everything's really clean. Because of the nature of the mat, it can attract maybe little lint particles or things, but I wanna suggest that that's a good thing because now you know what's been going in your food all this time. So whenever you're working on a cake, make sure your hair's tied back, you're wearing a nice lint-free garment that has no sweater particles, something like that. And then make sure everything that you're using is clean. Your table's really clean, your rolling pin's really clean, your mat's been wiped clean. And then right before you're ready to work, your hands. So what I do is take just a little piece of fondant and I'll rub down, the backs of my hands. Between the fingers, you can grab your rolling pin and wipe it down. And that little piece of fondant is gonna pick up those little bit of lint particles, and then you can just throw that away and discard it. So let's look at the mat really quickly. And right here I have side by side, one that's been broken in and this new one that I've just seasoned. So what I want to point out to you here is what might happen during first time use. This is what I'm referring to when I say it might grab itself. So see where it wants to grab here and grab here? It's really easy to get rid of that. So all you want to do is pull back the corner just to the edge of the fondant, okay? And then it's going to release itself and lay flat. Let me give you a warning. I see a lot of people pull back over the fondant and lay it back down. And then what happens is, see all these little air bubbles right here? You go back and roll that in and you create little pock marks on the surface of the fondant. So first, avoid it by just pulling back to the corner of the fondant. If you do roll those pock marks in, they're really easy to get rid of. Once you've got it to the size that you need, just take a very light amount of powdered sugar and sprinkle it right down on the surface. And what that's going to do is it's going to raise the mat off the surface of the fondant just a microscopic amount, so that when you go to roll it out, all those little air pockets just escape right out the side. So now that we've talked about how to use the mat and how to clean the mat, I want to talk to you about how to store the mat. There's a couple of do's and don'ts about it in general. I think you've probably figured out by now from seeing the use of the mat video, you definitely don't want to cut on it. If you have little cut marks in the fondant mat, it's going to show up in your fondant. So that's a no-no. Another thing is, since we're going to talk about storing it, you don't want to fold it up. You're going to make creases in it, and those are going to stay as well. The vinyl has a little bit of a memory to it, which can work with you and work against you. The biggest question that we get on storing it is let's say it's a brand new mat, it's kind of stiff like this one as opposed to one I've used multiple times and broken in. Maybe it's still a little bit stiff and I'm going to hurry, I'm just excited, I want to roll it up. What can happen is you can make little ripples in it like this, and because it does have a memory, if it sits in there for a couple of months before you use it again, that can work against you. So let me show you a couple things. First I'm going to show you how to avoid that, and then I'll show you how to fix it if you've already done it. So here's our new mat. We've just used it one time. So I'm just going to get a little bit of air between there and try to square it up as best I can. Okay, little air pockets I'm going to get out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a nice flat section here and start to roll it. Okay, now here is where if you started to roll it rapidly, you're going to make those little ripples in it. Rather than do that, pull that top sheet up and you can pull it a little bit taut, and then it gives a little bit of a nicer roll. They fall more nicely together. So just by pulling that top sheet up, it rolls nicely together. Sometimes, like if you look here, maybe you get a nice roll to it, but the edge maybe doesn't roll up exactly right. This is a really large mat. It's almost 30 inches by 30 inches, which just fits in the tube. So if you don't see yourself making a cake that large, it's absolutely okay to cut a little bit off that edge. So these are just some basic tips on the care and the use of the mat. I think if you'll just remember to season it correctly for the first time use, clean it correctly in between uses, no cuts or marks, folds, that sort of thing, and then rolling it up correctly, you're going to have a really, really easy time with it. So I know you're excited to get busy with your new mat. So if you'll just take a second and think about those things before you use it, then you're going to have a really great time with it. Thanks for watching.